will be one of those horribly unedited videos. Hi, my name is Heidi Wolf. The mic is working. I'm a student at GW, and I also do a little bit of research and a bunch of youth education and outreach as well. The study that I'm going to talk about today is called Urban versus Rural Apiculture, an Observational Study of Pollen Quality and Content. So the three things that I looked at in the study is the pollen biodiversity, the protein content, and the pesticide residues found in the pollen. And I did it with, some of you might be familiar with the entrance pollen traps that are made of plastic with the little plastic front porches, and it just collects about 50% of the corbicular pollen. And I did that for 2 sessions for over 3 days each, and so then I tested with these 3 analyses. So this is the first session, which is August 3rd to August 5th, and this is looking at the pollen biodiversity. And the way I did that was by sorting them by color. There's a lot of pollen keys out there, although the best ones seem to be from Europe, but which doesn't really always apply to us, but they're a good guide. It helps you differentiate between the colors that you actually see. So each little corbicular pollen pellet, the idea is that they only collect 1 pollen type at a time. So when it knocks off, you can sort them by color to determine how many different plants they're visiting during that 3-day trial. And what I found is in the urban environment, there's on average more. That 11 right there is at the USDA Witten building, and there's a little bit, a little bit of a variance, but overall the average is higher in the urban environment. One big criticism that is of my study is that the rural isn't actually rural, it's more kind of suburban, but it's difficult to actually get a real rural environment where you actually have the rural agriculturally based apiculture. So this is about as rural as we're going to get for the metropolitan area. And the same thing we find the second session during September. Now you'll note that this was just August and September, so this could definitely be improved upon by having ideally the spring flow, but funding and timing didn't work out for that, so we only got 2 sessions. But again, you can see that on average, it's higher in the urban environment. And so this is just kind of showing you a quick comparison between the 2, urban and rural. And this is a really cool site if anyone's interested in this. This is, again, the UK website, but on their website they have this pollen key where you can roll a little bit of color and it tells you what plant it is, which just kind of gives you an estimation, but it's pretty cool. That's, okay. So this is the protein analysis, and what you're looking at is how many micrograms per microliter of pollen are we looking at, which is my sample size. And so you can see I had 7 different collections, but the last 3 are a replication of one site to see kind of inter-apiary variance and sort of thing. And again, on the end we have an average. And here we have the rural. Oh, sorry, look, there you go, Sandy. The average for the rural is a little bit lower, but it's a little more consistent in the rural environment. But again, you're just looking at how much protein per the sample size. And here, one more time, same thing, just in the second session for the urban environment, and one more for the rural. And so the next slide has the poorly cropped design, but you see that overall, on average, we have more protein content in the urban environment than in the rural. One thing I want to say about this is that I didn't do individual protein or pollen protein analysis. I did kind of a subsample where I took 1 representative color of each type of plant and made a subsample of that. So again, this study could be improved, if anyone would like to do it, by doing the individual colors, because that would give us a much better idea. For example, the one site had 11 different types. Each one would be amazing, but that would take forever, so I'll help you if you want. Okay. And this is actually the only 4 out of about 200 commonly used pesticides. This was sent to the Gastonia lab, where the USDA sends all of their pesticide analysis. And they do a poll of about, well, not a poll, they analyze to see if there's about 200 of the commonly used pesticides, and they update that regularly to see what they're actually finding and what they look for, because it's expensive to look for pesticides. And what I found in both the urban and rural environment, very little pesticide use. And so LOD means limit of detection. And you can see it's 5 parts per billion, 1 part per billion, and they're really small. And so I can't be honest saying that you only see it in 2 of my sites for the urban and all 4 in the rural, but in their defense, that's the parasitology lab for the USDA. So you're going to find especially these miticides and that sort of thing. But overall, this is very nice to see that in our area there's not much pesticide use. So I like that. And so what I'm finding in a very introductory study is that there's more average biodiversity, protein content, and a low pesticide use overall, which is great for bees. And that's it.
Did you say there was low pesticide use both urban and rural?
Yeah, because what I had from the Gastonia lab is a spreadsheet of over 200 chemicals. And those were the only 4 I found. Everything else, there was nothing detected, and that's in the parts per billion. So.
And that includes the neonicotinoids?
Mm-hmm. Has everything you can imagine on there.
Those kind of pesticides wouldn't probably be used in suburban areas. Those are used in truly rural areas where they're growing farming grain crops.
Is that right? I thought they'd use them wherever they have aphids, like on tomatoes, when backyard beekeepers keep tomatoes.
There's things like imidacloprid are in really common yard use things as well. So it kind of depends on what you're willing to buy, or if you're informed and see it. It's kind of scary sometimes.
Can you tell us where your rural is?
I can. I actually have another. If you're all interested, I can tell you. But mostly the rural is in the Beltsville area, some around the Patuxent area. Trying to get as rural as we could be. Several of the sites around the big USDA site in Beltsville.
Could you put the slide up that had the British URL for the pollen?
Sure. It's really cool. The whole website is pretty cool. I want a website like that.
There's a really cool pollen website here too, pollen.com. You bang in your zip code and it tells you what the prevailing pollen is right now. And if you dig in and click on the pollen source, it actually tells you about the plant. And it's meant to sell claret, but it's Take questions.
That would be windborne pollen, and bees don't collect windborne pollen as much as they do.
That's one of those tricky things when people who are excited, they say, oh, if you eat honey, then it helps you with allergies. And you're like, yeah, but it's for, you're allergic to the windborne and the wind pollinated things, but I like where they're going with it anyways.
Right, you test for pests for if there was pesticides in the pollen.
Mm-hmm.
Did you test the nectar they were bringing?
I only did pollen analysis. Because it's, what I did was I tried to keep it very uniform with my collection. So just pollen on those 3 days, whereas if I would have done the nectar collection, could have been a little tricky. I could have just gotten the quickly filled up cells or even dissect them, but I just did just pollen.
Jerry Braunschweig had done some studies up at Aberdeen about 10 or 15 years ago using highly monitored hives, and the last place we found any contamination was in the honey.
That's what I found, especially with heavy metals and things like that. So that's why we mostly focus, and thank you for thinking of that, because that wasn't an idea before.
These are placed on the Aberdeen proving grounds where they've been firing off, depleted uranium rounds, chemicals,
wow.
things like that. So.
Yeah, so that's comforting because that's mostly what we eat anyhow. Any more questions?
Can you speak to the protein differences? Why you think you found that?
Well, I don't know why there was that much of a difference, but the idea, my hypothesis that I'm still pushing for is that there's more diversity in the city, and so you might get more types. And also, there's a lot of fruit trees, especially in this city area, which is where I really focused on. And fruit trees are kind of at the top of the list for protein quality and content. So maybe that's what it is. but I think maybe it's just the variety that's found, because I didn't do a quantified, quantified substance, I did qualified. So even if there was more colors than the other ones, I did one of each color regardless of the amount. So if there's more biodiversity, maybe there's more chance for more protein. Does that make sense? That was my reasoning anyway. Anyone else?
What do we search for on YouTube for your videos?
Urban Green Bee.
Urban Green Bee?
Urban Green Bee, and it's also if you go to urbangreenbee.com, and if anyone is interested in making videos or being part of, you'll find on the website I do a bunch of different community outreach projects. One I'm doing at Walter Reed and one I'm doing at a school. So if anyone's interested, especially veterans like me, if you want to get involved with that, working with native bees and that sort of thing. So please feel free to check the website. Yes, sir.
So you sampled the different colors, but didn't try and figure out if they compensated by collecting more of a type of pollen that maybe make up for lack of protein?
I did not check that. All I did was I weighed things and I tried to give an estimation of how much, but I did not go for how much of each type. I just tried to do kind of a subsample to get a baseline idea of what's there. So that's another area that could be improved because there was certainly much more biodiversity in one area, so maybe they're making up for it with the variety. That's a really good point. Any other questions? Thank you.
What I'd like to do now is see if I